Phase transitions are a concept from physics that I find very interesting because I believe that phase transitions are nothing but the actual solving of problems. So when we talk about the scientific process, when we look at Popper and his view of science as solving problems, when we look at the innovation stack, when entrepreneurs solve problems, when we look at disruption, which is just an accelerated form of iteration and solving problems. In fact, what we're talking about is phase transitions. In other words, inductionism, Bayesianism, all these things work if there is no phase transition. Or, and again, in other words, if there is no phase transition, then there is no wealth creation, then there is no scientific process, there is no progress. Without phase transition, all we do is incrementalism. That means we work on the given concepts, the problems that we've solved, and we improve them. We can improve them, but we cannot fundamentally solve new problems and create innovation stacks, or in a Popperian world, create science in the form of solving problems. So solving problems is phase transition. And I want to try to make that analogy in this episode from physics to other areas, in particular entrepreneurship and wealth creation. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's September 10th, 2021. This is Krim Delko. Since the last update, we're up 90 basis points. The market is down 40 basis points. For the year, we are up 15.3%. The market's up 19.8%. We're underperforming by 4.5%. So phase transitions are just another word for solving problems. Or if we want to use the analogy from physics, where phase transitions are defined as the change of parameters that define a certain substance. So if you take, for example, water, and then the phase transition from water is ice, liquid, and then vapor. And what happens is that the relationship between the molecules, the dynamics between the water molecules, the electromagnetic forces between the water molecules, those parameters change when there is a phase transition. And there's a lot of studies. Actually, condensed matter physics is a very deep part of physics where these types of things are being studied. And there's lots of interesting things that actually are being discovered. It's not a very well-studied form. I think if it's not your typical high school type physics, and even in college, it's probably more of a specialization. I find it very interesting. I think it comes back to quantum chemistry and Fritz London and the approach of chemistry from a physics perspective, from a quantum perspective, and trying to understand the relationship between particles, molecules, and all these things. So all that concept is being studied on the condensed matter physics, and phase transitions are a special case of condensed matter physics. So what I'm trying to say is that this particular phenomenon that we know from physics can be translated to science, can be translated to entrepreneurship, because what it really is problem solving. If you think about it, if you take water and you start adding temperature to liquid water, you are heating up water, and everything is fine, and the water molecules start moving faster and faster and faster until they reach a certain point where they have a problem. They need to solve a problem. And over the millions and billions of years that these molecules have existed, they have found a solution to deal with the problem of having been added this much temperature that certain dynamics between the water molecules don't work anymore, and then the solution is that water vaporizes. And in that sense, any kind of phase transition is simply a solution to a problem. If you look at a company, if you look at companies that we on Wall Street consider boring companies, what is it really we're considering? For example, if we look at a company like Coca-Cola, we look at a company like General Mills, these types of companies, they're very solid companies. The problem with those companies is there are no phase transitions. These companies are incremental. They keep doing what they're doing. They're doing it a little bit better. They're squeezing a little bit more returns out of the existing assets and all that. And that's fine. And for a lot of investors, that's actually a good thing. But for us, we're in the business of wealth creation. Wealth creation requires phase transitions. Phase transitions is what we call building an innovation stack. So when we say that we're building an innovation stack, according to Jim McKelvey and according to our belief, is that you solve problems, you create new problems, you solve problems, you create new problems. What we really mean is you continuously deliver phase transitions. And a company that delivers phase transition is also a company that cannot be analyzed through induction. So you can't just look at the past and then observe what's going on and then say, okay, this is what's going to happen in the future. A company that is full of phase transitions cannot be analyzed through analogies from the past. A company that is going through phase transitions cannot be analyzed through Bayesianism. So any kind of probabilistic approach to future outcomes cannot be analyzed in companies with phase transitions. There's another thing that I want to add here from the Popper discussion that we had a few days ago, and that is that we also have, if let's say in the Popper episode where I spoke about would Popper be a good investor, I asked myself, well, yes, of course he would have been a good investor because I think he is actually propagating the innovation stack. But the question was also about the ability or inability to probabilistically predict future outcomes. And I spoke about the problem of not being able to predict knowledge creation. And this is the same thing. In other words, if we use the phase transition language, it is very difficult to predict phase transitions because knowledge creation is another word for phase transitions. So when we ask, for example, can SpaceX fly to Mars? What's the probability that SpaceX can fly to Mars? The answer would be, it's hard to say because we don't know how many phase transitions are necessary for SpaceX to be able to fly to Mars. Or in other words, we cannot use probability because we know already now that given where SpaceX is today, without knowledge creation, without the knowledge creation that we unfortunately cannot predict, it is impossible to actually assess the ability or inability for SpaceX to fly to Mars. So again, the more phase transitions are necessary. So if we are today, in 2021, the knowledge that we have and the technologies that we have, they might be enough to do certain things, but to get to, let's say, other things such as Mars, or to decarbonize energy, or to digitize life science, for all these things, we need phase transitions. So using this language now, we can actually say that Orange Capital Partners is in the business of investing in situations where we believe phase transitions can lead to larger larger outcomes or positive outcomes with lots of impact. This is, in fact, just another word to define our mission: generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. Well, we're investing in situations, in processes, in companies, in ideas, in visions, where we believe that phase transitions will happen, and therefore that we will have a large desired impact. Now, of course, this is not random, and this brings another incredibly interesting point that I've recently come across in readings about phase transitions, and that is that, in fact, we humans, of course, we're just the same process like the beginning of the universe when hydrogen atoms collided into helium, and then we had the fusion and then the energy from stars, and then slowly but surely we had other elements created, and so on and so forth. We are just an extension of that. And if we look at the tree of life, of course, we are, we're like nothing, like a fraction of a percent of the age of the universe, because it just took so long for the universe to create what we consider life, and then from life, from beginnings of life like bacteria and all that, to get to the point where we are today. The point here I want to make is that we needed a lot of phase transitions to get to where we are today. And now humans, and now this is David Deutsch, humans have this ability to accelerate phase transitions because we are able to process information. What is information? Information is, this is Chiara Marletto now, information is counterfactuals. So instead of doing what evolution has been doing, which is kind of try and error randomly with, let's say, no direct purpose maybe other than just trying to get to some sort of increasing entropy or whatever the purpose of the universe is, we have other purposes. We have purposes that we believe in, that we have, let's say, the reproduction, survival, maybe other purposes, decarbonizing energy, helping people with medical problems. We have these types of purposes, and then we can use counterfactuals. In other words, we can use information, transmit information, and therefore accelerate the ability for phase transitions, or to use Popper's words, accelerate the problem-solving process. It's because we are able to process information, which is just another word for iteration. Processing information is just another word for iteration. You have counterfactuals, you have potential states of nature, and we just go through them faster. We try and error, build innovation stacks around them until we get to a phase transition, or in other words, we solve a problem, maybe a bigger problem, and then we create new problems, and then we solve them, and therefore we create one phase transitions after the other, and that helps us get to much faster solutions to our problems. So we humans are an acceleration of a process that has been going on for billions of years. It's just that we can process information. By the way, we're just another extension of life. Bacteria, and all that, whatever has DNA. DNA is just another form of processing information. But what we have purpose, we have will, we have the ability to accelerate the process of information, because we have actually been able to not just process information randomly, but through the application of computation, which in other words is just, at least we strive to a less random processing of information. This is what computation is really about. Algorithms are kind of a structured way of computation, or a structured way of iteration, which takes away the randomness and therefore accelerates iteration. So I went quite far in this episode. This is a very deep episode. It might not be one of those episodes that catches people's attention, like would Popper be a good investor or things like that, or you should buy Caribou. That's not that. This episode is really a deep philosophical episode. And if you're not interested in philosophy, this is not for you. But if you are, this is incredibly important and deep. So we are talking about phase transitions as another word for problem solving. Phase transitions in nature exist all over the place. We have them. Condensed matter physics is the realm of physics that deals with them. And we believe that this is just one application, physics. We can apply phase transitions in wealth creation, entrepreneurship. We can apply it in science, because what Popper calls problem solving in science is just nothing but phase transition. A phase transition is when we have physics and then we go from Newtonian physics to quantum physics. That's a phase transition, because it just simply changes the parameters, changes the way things are related to each other. In particular, let's say in Newtonian physics, we have certain ideas about gravity and certain ideas about how things should behave in the small and the large, and then those relationships change when we have a phase transition, when we have a new theory, we have quantum mechanics, and therefore also this is very Popperian. Of course, the phase transitions will never stop. They will keep going on and keep going on, because we humans have the ability to actually, through the processing of information, accelerate phase transitions, solve problems much faster, and create new problems by solving. Every time we solve a problem, we create a new problem. When water solved the problem of going from liquid into vapor, it created new problems. Namely, okay, what's going to happen to the vapor now if we keep increasing the temperature? There is always new questions to be asked. Every problem that's solved creates new problems, and those can be solved. Now, just to finish this episode, I want to now bring a more practical example of what I really mean of phase transition, let's say in the wealth creation process. If you have a company, let's say you have the car industry pre-Tesla, and now you have Tesla, that's a phase transition. Tesla solved certain problems that nobody else has been solving. They were successful in solving those problems. An electric car, a software-driven car, software-defined battery, a charging network, and decarbonizing energy, and all these things that Tesla is doing are phase transitions in the energy and transportation market. And therefore, the relationship between the components of the car and transportation and energy market are changing. Some companies are going bankrupt, other companies are becoming more suppliers, other suppliers are going bankrupt or changing their business model. That's the phase transitions we're talking about. You have phase transitions in nature. You have, for example, one of the big examples that people use is in ecosystems. You have prey and the animals that eat the prey, and then you can have a change in the relationship between those two, and then both of them can collapse, or they can live in some sort of equilibrium for a longer period of time, and things like that. Those are kinds of phase transitions we talk about in other areas than physics. And just to finish again, I think it is absolutely paramount to be clear about one thing. If we have phase transitions, we have wealth generation, or in other words, wealth generation can only happen through phase transitions in markets. Phase transitions are as crucial as problem solving. They're the same thing. Problem solving in science, Popperianism in science is the same thing in entrepreneurship. You cannot generate wealth without phase transitions, simply because in those areas where there aren't phase transitions, we're talking about incrementalism, and then we can have improvements, but we will spend a lot of resources just to protect our markets, and competition will come creep in, and the returns will come to some natural rate of return that is not very interesting for most investors, particularly now that we have such low interest rates. And phase transitions, again, are problem solving. Problem solving is the same thing as phase transitions. It's just these are different words for the same exact thing. And we at Orange Capital Partners, we're in the business of trying to assess the possibility of phase transitions in markets that can have very large impact. Thank you.